And we're live, streaming from the footsteps of New York City. We are Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and we're delighted that you can join us for our unique podcast community, where we explore the issues and challenges of the musical world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. You can check out our work on all the social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and such. And to join our mailing list, you go to my website at www.jasontram.net. You can also see our library of over 100 past episodes and all of our upcoming guests. We have guests that range from leading opera singers in the world, concerto soloists, rap artists, rock artists, and such. We look to cross the genres to look at artistic innovation during the COVID period. So we're delighted that you can join us today. Today we have a wonderful show for you. We've got Hawaiian-born baritone who has one of the leading careers as a dramatic baritone in Europe and has sung all over the major houses of Europe, North America, and Asia. Welcome to Jordan Shanahan.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
I know you're in Switzerland right now. What's the state of things across the pond?
Well, right now in Switzerland, things are closed down. We're not in a full lockdown, but theaters are closed, restaurants are closed, gatherings are limited. The same sort of limitations that a lot of people have been living through all over the place, actually.
Now, it hasn't always been like that. Has it been released and then you've come back? And how has your performance has been during this period?
Um, there have been various waves. In the spring, things were actually pretty limited. They were pretty open in Switzerland. They closed the borders, but the country was going very basically as scheduled. It tightened up again in the fall, and now we're in this is, I would say, the heaviest phase of lockdown we've had here. I've done one production that managed to get through rehearsals and have a premiere. We did two performances of a production of Othello that opened in October. Aside from that, everything has been either postponed or rescheduled, or a couple of productions they've actually just, canceled and are moving on with the scheduling when it comes back.
Well, there's always a silver lining in everything. I hear you have some really exciting news that you're a recent father.
That's right. My son Oscar was born about a month ago. I'm very happy. And actually, the silver lining in the COVID era is that I've been able to be at home to be a help to my wife during the late stages of the pregnancy, and now in his first days, which is really, really great, and wouldn't have been the case if I'd been working right now.
So there's always that kind of silver lining in things, and we'll talk about some of the self-discoveries. Of course, that is a major one as a father myself, but congratulations, that's wonderful. Why don't
Thank
we
you.
go back in time? Did you always know you wanted to be a singer?
No, not at all. I was embarrassed of my voice when I was young. My voice broke very young. Most boys, their voice changes somewhere between 13 and 16. Mine broke at 11. So at our sixth grade class song, there were 150 boy sopranos and me trying to sing the class song. And I was so embarrassed I wouldn't even sing Happy Birthday until I got to college, basically.
It's amazing how that works for boys. I was a middle school choir director for 1 year of my life, and that was a long year.
Yeah,
And that's like picture it every day. It's like your star singer goes, "Ah!"
yeah,
It's
yeah.
quite a traumatic time for the boys. I feel for boys going through that change.
No, I went to the University of Hawaii actually on a trombone performance scholarship, and I
Oh,
decided to study composition. And part of the composition practicum was to study all the instruments, including the voice. And when I got to the voice round, it went well. And, I was sort of steered into this. Would you like to be in the opera chorus? Would you like to do this? Have you ever thought of musicals? Have you looked at this kind of repertoire? And I had a great time with it. Um,
it's amazing when I find instrumentalists who can make that. I know a lot of instrumentalists who have made the transition to professional singers. And what is it that you think about being a trained instrumentalist that helps you when you're approaching vocal roles?
I think a lot of the training is very similar. The discipline of putting in the time and, practicing things, by rote, one click of the metronome at a time. That's discipline that a lot of musicians, especially singers, sort of skip on, unfortunately. Trombone specific, a lot of the technique is very similar. The breathing is very similar. If you consider that the embouchure that you use in a mouthpiece is similar to what you're doing with your chords, it's not that different. And the range is actually quite similar as
Yeah,
well.
you've stayed in the same range. Good for you, staying in that
Yeah.
baritone range.
In fact, I still use the Arben's Book of Exercises for trombone for vocalises.
That's hysterical. So when you first made that jump, when did you know that it was like, hey, I'm onto something here?
Pretty quickly, I was getting a lot of, I was successful as a trombone player, and I was playing principal in the orchestra at the university, and I was on a good path. But as soon as I started singing, I was being offered paid jobs at the opera company in Honolulu, and I was being offered, would you like to be in this musical? Would you like to do this? We've got, corporate gigs that we'd like you to come and sing a couple of Broadway tunes for. And I just thought, well, yeah, it's actually more fun to be on the stage than under it.
Once you get that taste of the stage, there's nothing like it, right?
Yeah.
So now, when did you decide that this is what I want to do for a living? And what was the next steps in making that a reality?
Well, that actually came pretty quick for me. I was at the University of Hawaii. I was singing in a production of Tosca. And the man who would eventually be my main teacher was a guest singing Scarpe. And I was standing right behind him in the Te Deum. And after one run through, he turned around and he says, "Why don't you come and talk to me after this?" And his name was Robert McFarland, a very successful baritone. And he said, listen, I'm going to be doing an artist residency at Temple University in Philadelphia. They've given me a few scholarships to bring in some talent, and I'd like to offer you one of them. So I had to think about it in my mind. If I was making the jump to go to Philadelphia from Honolulu and change my major from composition to performance, I had to sort of go in all in. There wasn't any sense in doing it if I wasn't really serious about making it work. So, I was probably 20 years old at that point.
Having known Robert McFarland for a while, and he's an interesting guy and very, very strongly opinionated, but a wonderful artist. And yeah, that was a great choice. And boy, well, those opportunities when they come, I always tell people you have to be ready for these opportunities. Because young people never know where their career is going to take them. I mean, it's such a long road ahead.
Absolutely. The small conversations that change the course of your life can happen over a cup of coffee or in a rehearsal or anywhere, fixing your car, waiting in the lounge at a Starbucks or whatever you're doing. You can bump into somebody that can absolutely change the trajectory of your life. And that's what happened to me for sure.
What are some of the things you learned in Pennsylvania when you're at Temple?
Well, I mean, a lot of it was just sort of adjusting. I'd never lived away from Hawaii. The first day there was an ice storm, I think I fell down about 14 times because I didn't know how to walk on ice. I didn't own any long pants. I didn't own, any coats or sweaters or any of that sort of thing. I sort of had to adjust to living in a temperate zone and managing my own life, thousands of miles from my friends and family. So it was a good experience growing up to sort of make my own way and, find my own space, build my own circle of friends, develop my own contacts. And, that was really good for me. As a musician, Robert was a technically excellent singer, and he passed, I hope, some of that along to me. It was a very talented studio that I was a part of, and we were all very interested in becoming singers. We were excited. We would go home and listen to recordings and, oh, do you like it better when Robert Merrill sang this or when Bastianini sang it? Or do you like this or that? Or I think Karajan conducts that way too slow. What do you think? Just sitting around and listening to things and trying to discover what the repertoire is and how it's supposed to go.
Historical parameters from the past.
Yeah. Performance practices. What's so special about Toscanini's recording of Otello? Oh, well, there's a lot of things about it, but what are they and what's different from something that was recorded 6 months ago? So it was a very good group of people.
And once you've mastered those, how did your career grow on that point?
From there, I did this series of young artist programs in the U.S. that a lot of people coming out of schools do. I went to Des Moines. I spent a summer out there, which was a great experience. After that, I was invited to join the studio at Orlando Opera, which was great because it was, main stage all year. We did a lot of performances of a touring show. I got to cover some roles, sing some roles, really live the life day.
Get your sea legs right there, right?
Yeah,
growing into it.
Work with some professionals, some of whom have become friends over the years, some of whom were just great to, I covered Bob Orth, who was a spectacular artist and a great, really generous colleague to say, you should do this. Don't think about that. Your voice is not like mine in this way, but you can do that better. And he was a wonderful colleague and great to learn from. From there, my roommate in college had been a Dutch guy, and he said, you should go to Amsterdam and audition for the studio over there. So I took a risk and I, got myself a ticket, went over to Amsterdam, sang an audition, and was invited to join the studio of the Opera Studio Netherlands. And that was great, and as a part of that, I got to live in Europe for a little while. I got to do a production at the very highest level for the first time. I was in a production with, Ricardo Chailly was conducting, and Rolando Villazon was singing Don Carlo, and, it was a star-studded cast, and I was just standing there with my mouth on the floor and my eyes with stars in them and trying not to screw anything up and overdressing for every rehearsal and coming early and all the things that everybody does. But it was nice to see that Rolando Villazon is a guy who puts his pants on one leg at a time like everybody else, and even at the highest level, it's the same process as it is in a school production. You just show up, you do your job as well as you can, and everybody looks at what their responsibilities are and tries to get the best final result.
Truly a craft, right? It's truly a craft where you have to know your craft inside and out and be professional and diligent and always bring your best every day.
Yeah, preparation is everything, and that's a hard lesson to learn for some people, but you show up, you know your stuff, you know what your responsibilities are, sing well, know your words, remember what you're doing in the scene, remember why you're doing it, and expect everybody else to do the same. And
Now, did you stay in the Netherlands or did you come back to the States after that?
no, unfortunately, my visa ran out after the season with the studio, so I had to come back to the US. And I was sort of casting around trying to figure out what came next because I didn't have any work for the next season. So I just entered every competition I could find and thought, well, if I get work, I'll cancel the competitions. And if not, I have something to do. Maybe I'll win a couple of bucks and maybe it'll lead to, singing for somebody who can give me a real job. And I didn't get much work, but I did have some success in competitions. And eventually that led into bigger competitions and bigger things, and which introduced me to the people that are working at higher levels in the business. And after some success with the competitions, going up to I think I made it to the semifinal level, the first round in New York for the Met competition and various other big competitions. I was invited to join the studio at the Lyric Opera of Chicago, which was, that had been a dream for me. It had been, this is at the time, unquestionably the highest level place. They treated you like professionals. You were on stage singing alongside great performers. I've had the chance to sing in productions with some of the really, legends of the business. I sang in a production of Traviata with Renee Fleming and Tom Hampson. I was able to work
Oh,
with, just the giants of the thing. Bruno Bartoletti came and conducted a couple of performances, and he's this legend who had been on a lot of those recordings that me and my college roommates had been listening to, and we said that's how Verdi ought to sound. And so to actually do a production of Traviata with him was a real thrill, to do, to realize, to be in the first time in a very dramatic opera. I was able to sing the Nazarene in a production of Salome, and to realize, well, yeah, it's heavy, but it's not ridiculous. It's not unsingable with this kind of an orchestra. There's nothing that's scary or, otherworldly about the people on stage with me. They're just people who this music happens to suit well. So, it really opened my eyes to what the people in the business are really like and what it looks like.
what are some things you learned from the great colleagues you were around? Some of the luminaries. What did that teach you? Maybe a specific artist.
Uh, I remember I did a lesson with Sir Thomas Allen, and we were working on, I think I was working on Dappertudo's aria, the one from the Tales of Hoffmann that's not actually in the show, the famous one.
I did that in a local production. They did no cuts. It was like the longest show I've ever conducted.
Yeah,
But it's a beautiful aria.
it's wonderful. I don't know why they've taken it out of the show these days, but it's not accurate, so that's that. Anyway, I was singing it, and he says, "Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. What key do you do it in?" And I say, "Oh, I do it in the high key." And he says, "Son, they're all high keys." But as far as just learning the craft, I remember working with Tom Hampson, and he was very, very intent on knowing why you're doing something. What are you saying? How are you saying it? What's important about it? What changes if you say it in an aggressive way or a sympathetic way? Finding a relation and telling a story, and that was advice that I've tried to hang on to over the years.
Well, he certainly listens to his own advice. When you listen to his art songs, they're so intimate and personal, and he really
Hmm.
digs into the subtext. And I really love that. And he takes that into his opera roles. It's very interesting.
He's a story,
Always.
and I think at a very basic level, as musicians, we have to be storytellers.
The technique is critically important, but boy, without that, the storytelling is why this exists.
Hmm. Absolutely, that's all music is. It's a means to expressing emotion and telling the story in a more effective, more visceral way. That's what I think.
Great words. Now, I think we worked together around this time period, the Ryan period, and we did some really big Verdi arias. And I'm like, this guy is something special. The voice just rings up there on the top for days, and it's easy top.
Oh, well, thanks.
And I just remembered, I'm like, I look forward to seeing where things are going to go. And how did you get back to Europe, where you finally everything started to open up?
Well, that was about the same period when I was moving to Europe, right after the concert that we did together, the concerts. I was just experimenting with changing my repertoire. When I was younger and I started singing, I made my debut when I was 24, and I worked fairly consistently through. So I sang a lot of lyric repertoire. I did a lot of, Figaro and the Barber of Seville and Marcellos and light lyric parts, because that's what was appropriate. But as I got into my 30s and I started to realize my voice was changing a little bit, I started to experiment with the heavier stuff. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to try out the Hernani arias. And I remember it was a great time. But I made the conscious, I was having a hard time and I'm getting some pushback from American theaters who knew me as a Figaro saying, why would I listen to you as a Scarpia? Why would I listen to you as a Rigoletto or in the German repertoire even? I think you sing what you sing and that's what we know you as. And it was hard to break the mold. So I made the choice to come to Europe and I sang for some agents with the heavier repertoire and I found somebody who was willing to work with me and she said, I think you can do this, but let's send you out for a broad range. Put a couple of heavy things on your audition list and a few light things that you've done and let's see what comes back. And I got a job at the theater in St. Gallen as the lyric baritone of the house. I had to sing like things like Torstadt and Harlequin and Ariadne of Naxos, lyric parts. But he said, but I know that you're changing repertoire and I'd like to put you on as a cover for some of the heavier roles, and maybe we can give you one or two nights. One of the nicest things about the European theaters, St. Gallen's not a large theater. Physically, it's about 750 seats, so they do a lot of performances. If they have to sell 10,000 seats and they have 2,000 seat auditorium, you can only sell 5 performances. But if you've got a 750 seat auditorium, you can sell a lot more performances for the same number of tickets. So if they're doing 12 nights of Rigoletto, maybe in between all of the nights that I'm singing Marullo, at the end on a Tuesday night when it's not well sold, he can give me a chance. And so I was able to try out some of the heavier repertoire. I was able to do Gioconda, I was able to cover Rigoletto, I was able to do Tosca, and get some experience working in a full production. I had the benefit of there was a senior colleague, a very, very well established Italian Verdi baritone, Paolo Gavanelli, who was Fest at the theater. And he would come in and do the opening run, and then somebody else who was less expensive would come and do the rest of the performances. And Paolo sort of took me under his wing, and he said, "You're going to do well in this. Let me show you what you need to be aware of, and what you need to be careful of, and what not to do, and what to do, and how to trust yourself." So that was really invaluable.
What an amazing way to start those roles and to get the experience and to watch a great, an older colleague do them and talk about the pitfalls and challenges. The European system has been a amazing way for Americans to jump in, to get into the business for a long time. Do you encounter a lot of Americans when you're over in Europe?
Yes, there are Americans in almost every cast that I'm in. When I was Fest in St. Gallen, it was a real sort of an American hub. I think we had 5 or 6 Americans in the ensemble at the theater, and a lot of guests would come through. Now, like I said, almost every production there's somebody. I love the business for the breadth of experience and backgrounds people have. You work with Russians, Bulgarians, Italians, Germans, Dutch people. But the Americans are sort of ubiquitous, and we're very well respected because the preparation that we are trained in the United States is a different type than is generally trained in Europe. And the theaters recognize you're going to be flexible. You can sing in more languages than your native language. You're going to be able to be flexible musically in different styles. You'll take direction well, and we've had stage combat training and acting training that some of the colleagues that are raised in different cultures don't get. So I think
let's talk about that. So, how do you notice the acting training is a little bit different?
I think that at least I can't speak for everybody, but the training that I got was very. I was trained as an actor, not as a singer who has to, portray a role on stage. The acting training is about storytelling. It's about making the decisions that an actor would have to do. If I'm singing the role of Macbeth, I'm going to read the play and make the decisions that I would do if I was, playing it on a dry play stage. In Europe, sometimes you have a lot more thought about the why. A lot of times you're not given the liberties to make decisions of your own because you have a director who's taking the production in a direction that's quite different from the original context that the piece was set in. So you have people who are like, well, if I come out and I sing a Barbara Seville Figaro, if I sing the Largo a Factotum in a traditional way, they might think that I'm a bit uh, stuck in one way of doing things or fixed in my ideas or old fashioned or anything like that. So they just sing and they wait for a director to tell them specifically what to do. In this production, you're going to be having a nervous breakdown and you're actually insane. You're strapped to a bed and whatever it is. Some of the things you get asked to do in European productions are hilarious. I did a production of The Ring where I was singing Alberich and I was dressed up as Wimpy from the Popeye cartoons. And Votan was a homeless man who was pushing his shopping cart across the stage and I was harassing him. So you never know what's going to happen.
That's probably an interesting one. Any other really fascinating productions you've been a part of that have really tested you as an actor and made you really think?
You know what? Maybe not in the way you're thinking, but I was really, really privileged to be part of the Bregenz production of Rigoletto a couple of summers ago, right
Well,
before.
congratulations on that. I've seen the pictures have been everywhere. Amazing, amazing looking production.
Spectacular, Cirque du Soleil-esque. It's a gigantic Statue of Liberty-sized robot that's climbing out of the Lake Constance. And that was dramatic in another way. You know, the audience is 100 yards away, so the acting has to be on a different scale. Everything has to be big, clear, automatic, almost acrobatic. The stage itself was a football field wide. So you think about that, you're singing the Cortigiani and you've got to be running up a very steep rake on a stage that's moving and climbing onto things and doing all of this. It was very challenging for a lot of reasons.
Amazing, and that production, that festival, is so famous. I know it was used in the James Bond film for their Tosca production a couple of years before that. And when you
That's
found
right.
out that you were offered that role, what was that like for you?
You know what? It was a little bit of, this is an adventure story. I was scheduled to be there the following year. This past summer, the festival was canceled, obviously, unfortunately, for Corona reasons. But I was supposed to do a production of another opera, and they called me and they said, can you come here tomorrow? We've just lost the Monterone in the Rigoletto production. And I said, well, I don't sing Monterone, but they said, you can learn Monterone in a couple of days. Don't worry about it. Just, if you can come here, if you can schedule out the summer, please come. And I said, okay, fine. So I got in the car, I packed up my bags, I drove up there. The whole time I've got the CD on loop, just learning Monterone's two lines in the opera, which are great. And it was a wonderful time. I was happy. I'd always wanted to work in Bregenz. It's a beautiful place to spend the summer. It's a spectacular um, place to work. You know, it's a theater that's outdoors for about 7,000 seats. So it's more like a sports stadium, and it's spectacle like there is nowhere else in the opera world. Anyway, we got through the rehearsals, and about 3 weeks in, they asked me to do a benefit concert and sing the Rigoletto arias and a duet because they knew that I sang that role as well. And the next day, they called me up and they said, "Listen, we've lost one of the casts of Rigoletto. Everything is triple cast because you know, you do 30 performances in a month. Nobody can sing that kind of a role every night. Would you be willing to step in and sing Rigoletto?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And they said, "Wonderful. You're a good singer. You know the production. We'd love to have you do it. The problem is we don't have another Monterone, so we still need you to sing Monterone on your off night."
Oh my God!
So it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was exhausting doing two sets of full rehearsals and, you know, brushing up the role and getting everything square. But it was great. It was one of the coolest productions I'll probably ever be in.
Did they make a video of that? Is the video available? Where can people see that?
There is a DVD available. It's one of the other cast members. It's a wonderful Bulgarian baritone named Vladimir Stoyanov was gifted in that cast. But yes, the DVD is available. You can search for the Bregenz Festival Rigoletto, and I'm sure it's easy to find on a lot of platforms.
So now you're over in Europe. You're working diligently. What's the difference between being in like on a fest contract in a European house versus the traditional path in America? How's that different?
A fest contract, you're a full-time employee of the theater. You know, it's like having a university job or a corporate job someplace. So on a plus, you have a regular salary. You don't have to worry about whether or not you're going to fill the March slot in your calendar. You know what your repertoire is going to be coming up. On the downside, you don't have a lot of say in what that repertoire is going to be. You're handed a sheet of paper that says, this is what we need you to sing next year. And unless there's something that is actually unfeasible in your voice, you know, if they ask me to sing a tenor role or something like that, then you're sort of obliged to say yes or no. And if you say no, then you're resigning your position and, you know, moving on. So it's a wonderful opportunity, but it's not completely without fault. The last season I worked in the US, I think I did 14 different projects, which was, that's a lot when you have to learn all the roles. I was in the middle of the transition of repertoire, so I was singing, you know, Albrecht and Eisenstein in the same season, if you can imagine something like that. When you get to Europe, that can happen as well. But you'll also be asked to sing, you know, Don Cairo and Mazzetto in small roles in another production, which is sort of your day off. Come in, sing something short, and then you'll work on the big thing. The joke is always that the two armored men and the magic flute are Siegfried and Votan from last night.
Yep, you're out there. You're a servant to the stage.
So for the last few years, I've actually been working freelance in Europe, which is a lot more similar to what I did when I was in the US. You work with an agent, you find projects that fit your calendar. If you're lucky, you have a little bit more control over what repertoire you're singing. Thankfully, in my repertoire, I sing dramatic Wagner, Strauss, Puccini, Verdi, heavy stuff. So I have a bit of control about what I sing, and I'm able to sort of plan out where I'd like to go with my voice and the repertoire. So it's more like what I could do in the US, and the distances are smaller, which is really nice. I live in Switzerland. If I have a production in Austria, I can hop on a train or drive, or, you know, if I need to fly, I can. If I have another production in Germany, the same thing. So it's very easy to get around. It's very common for the performances to be spread out over months or even years. So it's not uncommon to have a month where you might have performances in 3 or 4 cities. So the shorter travel distances are quite important. Imagine if you had to go back and forth between the West Coast and the East Coast in the US. That's exhausting.
Yeah, I guess you run. It's so much easier to hop on a train, be there in a few hours, and ready to work. That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember one time I was in the middle of a set of rehearsals for a modern opera in Switzerland, and I got a call. Can you take over Night of Tannhäuser in Weimar, which is about an 8-hour drive from here? And they said, we need you to get here immediately because somebody's sick and the show's tomorrow. So I did the dress rehearsal, got in my car, drove overnight to Weimar. First thing in the morning, we worked all day, sang the show that night, got back in my car, and had to drive back to Switzerland because the premiere of the show I'd just done the dress rehearsal for was the next morning. So that sort of thing does happen, but it's possible. Where if I was going between, let's say, Boston and San Diego, it just wouldn't be.
You can't drive that. You can't drive that one. There's not enough enough hours. So getting into the more dramatic rep, you're in St. Gallen. How did you started making your inroads into Wagner? When did it start to click for you that that's going to be the repertoire that you're destined to sing?
I sort of always knew that that's where my voice was going to end up. I sang a lot of, Rossini's Barber, but it was always a little on the high side for my voice, and my tenors usually screamed at me for being too loud.
Oh, tenors.
Yeah, well, But anyway, it was more of a question of getting permission. You hit a certain age, you get to be 30, 35, 40, whatever it is specifically. The voice takes on a bit more color. People are willing to say, okay, the technique is held up for, 10 years of a career. Maybe we can trust him with something. Anyway, I did 2 years fest in St. Gallen with this sort of hybrid contract as the house lyric baritone with some, responsibilities in the dramatic repertoire. And after that, I decided to go freelance. And the first job I got was a Telramund in a Lohengrin.
Oh.
which is, for those who are not as familiar with the Wagner, one of the most difficult of his baritone roles. It's very high, it's very declamatory, it's not very melodic, it's just sort of pounding yourself against a wall all night. And I was nervous, but I thought to myself, okay, I want to do this. And it worked. It felt great. I should
Luckily, you've
have,
always had those great high notes, so that be
yeah.
gifted.
As I got older, I didn't know where my voice was going to go. Until I was in my mid 30s, I had a very bright timbre in my voice. So I took a little bit of time to explore, well, maybe I should be looking at the held and tenor repertoire. So I looked at that. I technically worked it out, and I figured, well, I can sing some of the roles, but not all of the roles. I don't think I can sing the Fach if I can't sing, the higher ones. So this isn't going to work. I went back and I found that that training in the high had actually opened up some color and some bottom. And now I sing some things that are considered bass or bass baritone roles as well. I love singing the Verdi Requiem, for example. I love singing things like the Flying Dutchman, or some of those roles that are often sung by basses. It was a question that I'm still in the middle of finding which roles fit, which ones aren't as good a fit, what's the best progression. I've had some conductors that were really helpful to me. I have to give a pitch to Union Avenue Opera in St. Louis, who hired me to do their ring cycle. They were doing one every season in the Jonathan Dove reductions, in an extraordinarily talented cast with some very talented people we were all sort of around the same age and trying out Wagner for the first time to see if it fit. And it did. It was great. And there's been some missteps. I've decided that there's some roles that I've tried aren't the best fits, and some other ones are great. I'd be completely happy if I could fill my calendar completely with Scarpias and Dutchmans and Johanna, because they fit really nicely in my voice. They're comfortable and they're easy to sing. But there's some other roles that I sing a lot. I sing Fidelio. I enjoy singing Pizarro, but it's not as rewarding a role. It's that one's just sort of, can you get through the brass?
You have to have the brass in the voice to project over that brass in
That's
the pit,
right.
right?
Be a trombone.
So now, at this point in your career, how many roles have you sung?
I just redid my website and I counted them all up. I have done a grand total of 93 roles,
Wow.
74 of which are leading out front roles, and the rest are, your sort of La Cena e Pronta and Mazzettos and things like that. But because of the switch, I had been working for 10, 12, 14 years as a lyric baritone, and I'd gotten through most of that repertoire, and now I'm starting from scratch and learning all of the roles in this. Pieces, that I'll sing three roles in. When you look at something like Rheingold, right now I sing Albrecht. Next season I'll be doing a Donner at a big theater, and down the road hopefully I'll get a chance to sing a Votan. So you
It's on the
think about
horizon. We hear it in
ring.
the instruments on the horizon.
Yeah.
So, what's exciting about Votan? What brings that as the one of the apexes of the pinnacles of the baritone rep?
You know what? I mean, on a very selfish level, as a baritone, we don't get too many roles, too many operas that are all about you. There are a few. There's
King of the
Rigoletto,
gods.
Flying Dutchman. There's a few, Eugene Onegin maybe, but Votan is this iconic. I mean, look at it this way. They had Anthony Hopkins play him in the Marvel movies.
That's true. That is true.
It's this spectacular character, and he's flawed, and he's a god, but he's very human. He's interesting in his flaws. He overextends himself in Rheingold and spends the rest of the ring cycle trying to clean it up. By the time you get to Siegfried, he realizes his mistakes and he's trying to take a step back and just be very philosophical about things. It's a spectacular arc of a character. Um, I think I actually enjoy Albrecht quite a lot as well, and it's another equally interesting character arc. It's not a black and white villain and good things. If you look in the way they're described in the text of the shows, they're black elves and white elves. They're all not that different from each other, and you have these two colossal figures, these demigods and gods, and they're just trying to make it go. Albrecht is scorned, he's pushed away, he's abused, and he becomes defensive out of it. And he says, "Well, screw you. I'm going to do things my way." Votan says, I want a bigger house. He can't pay for the bigger house, and that screws up everybody. And they realize they can't do it all themselves, so they enlist all of these myriad minions and teammates and offspring to play things out on their own. It's the music is spectacular. Vocally, it's incredibly rewarding to sing. One of the best kept secrets in opera is that Wagner wrote really well for the voice. He's a wonderful vocal writer.
Yeah,
Very
it's
rarely does
spectacular.
very rarely does he ask you to do things that are not feasible for a good solid technique. I remember the first time I was singing in a big cast in a Wagner opera. There was a 85-year-old bass who was singing. Talk about a technique to still be singing at 85. And he came up to me and he says, "Why are you working so hard? If you have to sing forte all night, you shouldn't be singing this. And you should. Just relax. Your voice is going to go." So, finding the permission to just sing it musically and trust that it's going to make it to the back of the house is a big part of it.
So, starting doing Wagner roles in a smaller house like St. Gallen, how did it translate when you got to some of the bigger houses that you've performed in? And give us a few of the really exciting places that you've done Wagner.
You know what? I think that it's nice to try things out in a smaller venue. I think that it's safer. You don't feel the pressure to overdo it, to push, to do the things that we all have the blacker demon on our shoulder saying, "Give it a little more. Go for it. Go for it. Go for it." We had lots of rehearsal time. It was a single cast, so I got all of the rehearsal time, as opposed to a double or triple cast where you're tagging in and out, and maybe you don't get any rehearsal time at all. You get a chance to work closely. I knew the orchestra well, so I was able to go down and talk to the brass players and say, "Hey guys, can you help me out here?" Some of the places that I've done Wagner, well, I can announce that I'm going to be doing the new Ring Cycle in Berlin in the fall
Bravo.
at the Deutsche Oper. That's going to be with Donald Runnicles. It's Nina Stemme at the very highest level. That's really exciting. I'm very excited to be doing that. And to be doing Albrecht in a production like that in a theater like that is very exciting. I've done concerts. I've been invited to sing with the Wagner Festival in Budapest to sing with all sorts of things. Some other repertoire I did, Salome with a festival in Korea, which was great fun. I was supposed to be making my debut at Covent Garden in the fall with Shanahan, which I was, more than disappointed when it had to be postponed. It's not canceled. It will happen. It's going to be in the future, and I'll let them announce that. It's great when you get to the big theaters. The benefit of the big theaters are the orchestras are unbelievably good. They're detailed. They will bring the sound down when they need to and let it explode when they can. The conductors are talented. You get talented orchestras and conductors in small theaters, but it's not a given. In the big houses, you're going to have the level of talent that just makes you go, "Wow, I'm just happy to be here."
So exciting, and congratulations on all that's growing and expanding. And as soon as this period's over, it will come back. I mean, we're all in that holding pattern together, and and it will emerge. But all those things you've been building for. How do you keep your voice healthy with some of the largest roles in the repertoire and the schedule that you have had, which has been exhausting just reading about it? How do you keep your voice healthy?
I've got a series of exercises that I do. Usually what I'm working on is being the facility to sing delicately. I think that if I can sing in a soft way in my voice, my piano is not going to be the same as a Baroque specialist's piano. But if in my voice I can be delicate, if I can attack a note without force, if I can keep the tone pure, if I can still do the coloratura stuff that I used to do when I sang a lot of Rossini and Bach, in my voice today, I find that it translates. And I do the same warm up if I'm singing, Bach in a concert at a church, or if I'm singing a performance of Tosca. I think that it's important to be gentle with your instrument. The kinder you are to it, the kinder it'll be to you.
Do you have teachers and coaches? Do you have a team of people over there that you work with on a regular basis?
I haven't worked with a teacher myself in quite a while. I do some teaching myself. now, and I
Excellent.
find that working as a teacher and helping, I don't work with beginners very often. Most of the people I've worked with have been colleagues or young professionals in studio level positions that come to me and they said like they'd like to have some experience, to listen to what I have to say. And I find that helping younger singers try to figure out the things that I'm working on myself really focuses in on this works, that doesn't. Look at how that helped him. Maybe I can do some of that better myself. I do have a team of, specialist conductors and coaches that I'll go to if I'm doing a new role for the first time. Um, for example, I was supposed to be doing Parsifal for the first time in June. So I had been neck deep in the preparation for that. And I was, trying to figure out, can I get to Vienna? Because that's where my Wagner guy is. If not, maybe I can do some kind of a Zoom, at least talking through the score if we can't coach, and I really find a lot of value in listening to a wide variety of recording for performance practice, for different tastes in chronologically how did people do Parsifal in 1920 and 1940 and 1960 and 1980? What's changed?
Isn't
And
it
it's,
amazing how performance practice always evolves? So every generation puts their own stamp on each repertoire style.
yeah. And, you can like or hate the way that it is today, but it is the way that it is today. And we live in a very sort of accurate, some would say dry era as far as musical interpretation goes. And that's not the way that my blood flows. But I recognize, okay, I need to spend more time with my metronome because that's what the conductors are looking for more often than not. And if you get somebody who says, "Why are you doing that? Just let's find something that we can bend with," then I say, "Oh my God, thank you, all of the gods. I'll sacrifice a goat for you all tomorrow," or whatever. But I look for singers who I respect in the repertoire. In my repertoire, I look for recordings of Jose Van Damme or Thomas
Sure.
Stewart or George London, the guys who have done it well before. What did they do well? What did they have a hard time with? I try to talk to some people. I'm lucky enough to have some contacts that are pretty high up in the business now and retired that I can talk to and say, okay, I'm doing Amfortas. What did you look at? What did you have a hard time when you did it for the first time or when you did it for the 600th time? You know, and so I
We have
think
our
it's,
first question from the audience. Marie from Seattle asked, "Who is your all-time favorite Votan?" Good question.
ooh, I'm going to go Thomas Stewart. It's a little lighter. I'm a baritone, so I like the baritone Votans as opposed to the real dark basses. I have a lot of respect for the great Votans of today. Greer is amazing. Marin is amazing. Uh, but for me, if you listen, you talked a little bit about Wotan's Abschied a little bit off air. If you listen to the recording that he made with Carry On, it's so delicate. It's a huge voice. It's plenty big enough for it. But Ihr Augen leuchtendes Bad. It's so parlando. It's so gentle. He's talking to his baby girl. And you get that with him that you don't in some of the other ones where it's a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah, it can be so overwhelming. It is, I've done a reduction of that one. I conducted that as a reduction, and boy, that's a big orchestration. But Wagner's a genius at orchestration. He basically wrote the textbook of orchestration in the modern period, so he
Exactly.
knows what the baritone can sing over and what he can't,
Hmm.
and he never overshadows. Like he may explode, but it's usually when you're not singing or when you're on a high note.
Exactly.
So
When you need to be loud, he puts it in a part of your voice that you can be and will probably be loud, even if you don't try to be. And when you need to be soft, he'll arrange it so that you can be. You can sing softer in Wagner operas than you can in a lot of Donizetti and Rossini, actually. If you think about the pattern
that's a
things you
great quote. I'm writing that down. I'm going to attribute that to you.
have.
It's a good one.
Yeah, he was a brilliant writer, a brilliant composer. He had his flaws as a man. Everybody knows that.
Certainly
But as a
did.
musician, he knew what he was doing.
He also had a lot of bad PR with the those pictures of the Third Reich coming to Bayreuth. I mean, a lot of bad PR and terrible.
Well,
But
nobody can control what happens to their body of work
afterwards, yeah,
after they're passed. And yes,
it's a
his
good
daughter
point.
was involved in that, but that was his daughter. And too many people have a kid that they're a little disappointed in which way they take their lives. So yeah, that wasn't him. He wasn't a saint. I'm not trying to say Wagner was a great man. He was a racist. He was a chauvinistic, selfish man who slept with the wives of his patrons and stole money from everybody who left their safe unlocked. but he was a genius musically. And you know, we're
And
in an
just
era.
he didn't he direct those productions too, and he wrote the librettos. I mean, like,
He wrote the
holy smokes!
librettos. He did the orchestrations himself. He did the music. He directed. He conducted. He did the casting. I mean, it was a one
He
man
left
show.
plans for the sets and the costume. He like everything to the nth degree. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, well, it's a control freak, is what it is.
My favorite quote on Wagner is after he wrote the libretto for the Ring Cycle, he said, "I've done it. I've written the greatest work of literature ever made." He thought that libretto was like up there with Shakespeare. I'm like, that's how like he thought of himself. It's incredible. Like, wow.
Well, a good, healthy ego is something we should all strive for.
And opera singers never have that. That's never.
You know, you see all types, like in any business. You see
Yeah.
people who expect the world to stop and spin around them, and then you see people who are just as happy to, you know, slip out the back door and, you know, take off their costume mustache so nobody recognizes them when they go across the street to get a beer after the show.
In my experiences, even a lot of the greatest, I mean, like to get to that level is so much hard work and so much failure inherent in every audition. You know, you never know where things go, and that it's an incredibly humbling line of work. You may be the top one day, and you know it's a challenge.
I remember, yeah, I've worked with people at the ends of their careers, and it can be very sad when when they're not adjusted and ready for the end of the singing phase of their life. As a singer, my career is a set number of years that I have no control over. I can do as much to take care of my body and my technique as I possibly can, and that's your responsibility as a singer to prolong things. But you don't see many people singing into their late 60s, and that's just a law of, you know, physiology. The voice changes. If you're not changing your repertoire every 5 years, you're missing something. Your voice will change continually through your life. And at a certain point, it's not becoming bigger and darker and louder and cooler, and you know, you can't do things that you couldn't do before. You have to wheel back. I did a production of La Forza del Destino a couple of years ago with a really brilliant bass baritone who had been, he sang Votan everywhere, he sang the Dutchman everywhere, and now he was singing the Marquis de Calatrava, which is a small little bass role in the first scene. But this guy was 86 years old, and his voice was
Amazing.
in amazing shape. He had taken care of himself, and he says, "No, I'm not going to sing Zach's again," and I'm sorry for that because it was a wonderful role. But honestly, I couldn't remember the text, so that's fine.
That's such a great. I've gotten to work with some wonderful older colleagues who are still out there doing it and with integrity, and they've been on the big stages doing the big rep, and they bring such incredible joy to the smaller roles that they sing. I mean, if you love the stage, you just love the stage. It never goes away.
Yeah, yeah. I was lucky enough to do a production of Lucrezia Borgia, singing one of the smaller roles. It's a great grand dame, old school bel canto piece with Edita Gruberova, who was, I won't say how old, but because she wouldn't appreciate that, but she was, let's say, well past pension years. And she was still singing Lucrezia Borgia. And it was amazing. And the voice wasn't what it was 20 years ago, but it was amazing. The top was secure, the coloratura was clean, there were some holes in some registers, but it was unbelievable to see. She walked in, she never opened her mouth unless she was working. It was eye-opening. Yeah,
I was friendly with Paul Plishka, who sang at the Met doing, you know, he was one of the great bass baritones who then transitioned to doing buffo roles, and he did until a couple years ago.
Yeah, I was.
He was funny.
To meet him several times when I was in the basement at the Met covering years back, and he was the nicest guy in the building and such a professional, and you know, he was just a good guy who took care of himself. And he had a lot to offer. He was a storyteller, and the reason he was an effective buffo was that he was telling a story, and it just happened to be funny. You know,
different version of the story.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are so let's go dig into the COVID innovations. Like, what are some discoveries you've made? Because when you're in career, you're running around. There's a million rehearsals. You're traveling, performing. Now that you have a little more free time in your schedule, I don't know about having kids as free time, having 4 of them, but what are some things that you've done during this period that maybe you wouldn't have done otherwise?
Well, I've spent some time on my languages, my spoken language skills, which are, you know, they're not what they should be. Nobody's are. Well, some people's are, and I always feel a little inadequate when it comes to that. So I've been doing my at-home courses to try and improve myself there. I've done a lot of translation work to get ahead on the projects I have coming in the next couple of years. I got into a couple of leader projects, which are great, and I never have the time to do that kind of repertoire. I love it. Nobody wants to pay you to do it, and it's hard to put in the time, the work to prepare an hour-long leader program if you're not going to have a paycheck at the end of it, because the study time that you have is finite, and if you have to be prepping the ring cycle and you say, well, I'd love to sing some Brahms, well, but nobody's paying you to do the Brahms, so it's hard to find the time. So I was able to steal some time and get some leader prepped. Hopefully I can find an excuse to record it or do a concert someplace and use it. But even just working on it for the sake of the music was really lovely.
What specific pieces, if you could give away a few?
Yeah, I did some. I prepped the Für Ernste Gesänge, which I had looked at in college and never I thought they were. I wasn't ready for them yet. I prepped several songs from Das Knaben Wunderhorn. I prepped a wonderful cycle that everybody should know about and very few do, called the Jedermann monologues by Frank Martin. They're just spectacular.
Frank Martin's known for his great double choir mass. That's very famous.
Yes, that's a great piece too. I sang that.
But I don't know his leader.
Choir, great composer. I was thinking at the time, well, maybe if full productions aren't going to open, theaters may want smaller scale things like leader recitals that they can offer. Frank Martin was Swiss, so there's always a little bit of the rah over the hometown guy. So that did play into why I picked the repertoire. But it's just great songs. I worked on some English song, which I've always liked. Did some work on a project with Hawaiian leader, which Hawaiian songs, everybody thinks of ukuleles and steel guitars, but a lot of the songs are really, they're much more serious than that if you look at them in their totality. So I was trying to put together a program where I could present it in a formal setting. And that's still in the works, and it might happen and it might not, but I do hope that I get back to that and have time to finish the project up.
In your crazy busy life, do you get time to go back to Hawaii? Have you made time to go back to your original hometown?
I do try to go back as often as I can. I still have family there. My grandmother is 104 now, so you don't know how many chances you're going to have to get back.
God bless, 104. That's some great genetics there. That's good to hear.
But obviously this year travel has been, not on the table. Hawaii has been very responsible and strict with their quarantine measures. And I can't in good conscience make a trip and then stay in the same house with somebody at that age, and at least until we're all vaccinated. So this year, no, but in general, I try to go back every year, every 2 years if the schedule doesn't allow it. One of the, side effects of this is, I'm in a very fortunate position. I recognize how happy I am to be in demand and in the mid-career where my calendar is full. As soon as the doors open on theaters, I'm back to work, and I've used up all of my free time for the foreseeable future with this past year. All of the productions that I've lost 10 productions so far, have been rescheduled or pushed, or can we put 3 performances here and can you fly around? And so if the theaters are open, next year is going to be the busiest year of my career. Coming back to try and fill in the work that was lost this year, the theaters want to do the productions that got lost. So I don't know what the next couple of years are going to be like. I think it might be difficult. Also, with a newborn, traveling halfway across the world might be a little bit more of a hurdle than it was before.
I have to ask, being that you and your wife are both professional singers, how challenging is that going to be to balance that?
That is the $1 million question. Yes, extremely is the answer. We've gone through the calendar for at least the next year and a half, and we say, okay, you can take a maternity leave. Thank God. Thank you, Europe. Maternity leave is a thing here. We can travel as a family for a while. After that, maybe she, if travel is possible, can take the grand showing off the baby tour and go and visit all of our families back in the U.S. We come back when she goes to work. I'll be in one theater for a while. Maybe I can have him with me, and we'll get a sort of a nursery attendant or something, a nanny to help out. I can have my mom come and help us. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of logistics that we're going to be playing with.
I have four. My oldest is 21 and my youngest is 16, and twin 18-year-olds between that. So they grow up around the art. It'll give them such unique perspective on the world, and it's such a blessing. It adds such a deepness and richness to your life. So good luck on that journey. It's exciting.
Thank you. I'm very excited, and I couldn't be happier. He's a great little guy. Hope he enjoys it and doesn't resent me for dragging him all over the world.
I'm reading a great biography from an author who's coming on the show. Jan Swafford wrote four of the greatest psycho documentaries his most recent just came out on Mozart. And I'm in the chapters about Mozart touring around with Leopold and traveling to the world's great courts as that's where he learned. That's where he absorbed all these great styles internationally and met the great composers and played for all the aristocracy. So, your son will be surrounded by all these great artists and great places. It's quite a special childhood.
I hope so. I hope we can give him a good way to live. I think that it's going to be. I'm very excited that he's going to grow up at least bilingual. Living in a German-speaking country, speaking English at home. I'm very grateful for that. I wish I'd had that when I was a kid. I'm grateful that he'll be around the arts, that he'll experience different cultures, hopefully, and get to see that the world is more than the way you live in your hometown. The way you live in your hometown is spectacular. I miss my hometown like you can't believe. But there are other ways to live. My favorite thing about a new place is sitting down in a local shop, coffee shop or something, and just seeing how the locals live their lives and, how people do things differently and how people do things the same way.
That's such a great part of the musical experience is when you meet colleagues from all over the world and get to be friends and get to sit in rehearsals and see how things are the same and different. And you learn so much from just going to the cafe and asking questions and just getting to know people.
Absolutely. So I hope that he has the experience of growing up with friends all over the world and speaking different languages with different people. And I hope I do a good job.
Well, Jordan, you're a great guy, and you've built a great career for yourself. And I think you're going to come out of this at the height of your popularity. We look forward to watching you continue to take the world's leading stages and into those next roles. And when you do your first Votan, I want you on the show again if you're free.
Absolutely, I'll let you know.
I can't wait to talk about the preparation of that role. That's going to be special.
Yeah, well, that's a long haul one. I've already started looking at it so that when it comes up, it's not a hectic thing.
Time to dust off that score and start. That's a long one.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and wish you all continued success. And please keep in touch.
It's been my pleasure, Jason. It's been great to catch up with you, and take care.
Continued success. Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe to us on YouTube and hit that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on upcoming guests and topics. This coming Thursday, we have the internationally renowned composer and pianist Joel Rainey is going to come on, who's written so much sacred music, and his choir music has been sung all over the world. So we look forward to having Joel on. So thank you so much for joining us, and remember, keep music alive.
Sapesse e forse il disonor. Cielo al lampo, se fossi il seduttore, e sogna mano e vive. Questa chiava è vita. Ecco i folli, che tempo e debbo al suo calore, anch'io lo salvo. Se fosse quell'inno maledetto che battiò il sangue mio, il suo cielo si franga,